Good evening, everybody. It is Monday, October 21st, 2024. And we're meeting here for a meeting of the Board of Directors of the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District. Can we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Director Oglesby. Director Adams.
Here.
Director Paul.
Here.
Director Eisenhart.
Here.
Director Edwards.
Here.
Vice Chair Riley.
Here.
Chair Anderson.
Here.
6 members are present.
Okay, will you join me in, well, George, please, the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Teacher. All right. Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda?
There are not.
And now it's time to ask if anybody would like to say anything to the board about any issues except those that are on the agenda. If you'd like to make a comment, the limit is 3 minutes. Please let us know. No comments.
One on the, there's
On
some on the Zoom.
Are there? I see, I can't see that far. Oh, thank you. But yeah, I have to keep out there. I see it.
Melody, when you're ready.
Yeah, Melody Chrislock. This is just an idea that I was going to throw out there. I just wondered if it's possible that the money that has to be paid back in the taxpayers' lawsuit, would it be possible for us as ratepayers individually to sign something saying we would like to contribute that money to MPWMD as a thank you for all the work they've done on our behalf? You know, I just wondered. I mean, I hate to see it just all go to the state. Why? You know, we'd rather see it go to you guys. Anyway, just a thought. Don't know if it's a legal possibility, but thought I'd throw it out there. Thanks.
Thank you, Melody.
We never start gentle with this meeting, do we?
All right.
Anna Thompson, when you're ready.
Oh, excuse me. Let's see.
Good evening. Anna Thompson. I'm a resident of Carmel.
And are you there?
Can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, I start all over. Okay, and good evening. Anna Thompson. I reside in Carmel. I cannot understand how CalAm, a monopoly, is allowed to continue promoting a desal plant, which we don't need, cannot afford, and is harmful to the coastal ecosystems. There are too many unresolved issues with CalAm's proposed desal plant, including groundwater rights, environmental damage and degradation of coastal ecosystems, saltwater intrusion into marinas water basin, and with the expected rise of sea levels, the feasibility of the proposed slant wells locations. Basically, by the time it is completed, it would have to be modified. CalAm's proposed desal plant will likely double the cost of our water, making it unaffordable for a large number of inhabitants. The Pure Water Monterey has been producing enough water to stop CalAm from its overdrafting of the Carmel River, and the in-depth and well-documented analysis of water supply needs shows that the expansion of Pure Water Monterey will be producing the additional water needed for growth, housing, and drought for at least the next 30 years. Nonetheless, CalAm continues to claim that their proposed desal plant is required to address future growth needs for our district. Their rationale is based on data that is both deceptive and unsubstantiated. If CalAm is so sure that their desal plant is needed, I think CalAm should assume all risks and liabilities associated with the construction and operation of their proposed desal. Water recycling and water banking should always be preferred over desalination. In the unlikely event that a desalination plant will need to be constructed at some future point in time, it should be clear that the siting and sizing of such a plant will be best handled by a publicly owned agency focused on the true needs of the community and in collaboration with any other affected community. In all likelihood, advancements in technology will have occurred at such a time to allow for a more economical and environmentally friendly facility to be built. CalAm's desalination plant is too expensive, too risky, and is not needed. It must be stopped. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Do you see any others?
I see no other raised hands.
Okay, thank you. We're at the consent calendar. We have 4 items on the consent calendar. Would anybody like to pull any of the items?
I'd like to have a comment on number 2, but I can do it before or pull it and have a comment.
We'll just adopt the other items and then discuss what you want to discuss. So discuss, adopt 1, 3, and 4 at this time. And I have I'll move to approve the consent calendar.
If we could take it out to the public as well.
Anybody have a comment that they'd like to make on the consent calendar?
Chair Anderson, I see no raised hands.
Thank you. Can we have a motion for 1, 3, and 4? Did you make one?
Mary.
I did. I'll make a motion
Sorry,
for,
Mary.
to approve 1, 3, and 4.
Thank you. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Director,
Item 2 on the treasurer's report. Just was going over it in some detail. Sometimes I look in more question marks than other times. This time I had a question mark. In the list of rebates, I just want to compliment the district, but I want to compliment Michelle. The rebate, so 15, 16, 17, there's 3 pages worth of rebates. Almost all of them are individuals. We only rebate $27,000 according to this report. But what I want to compliment the district on is that there is an enormous contribution that we as available to the public in general as a way to manage their water use. And I just appreciate so much of what the district does, but the number of people that are involved in this is every time we get a report, we get a reminder about what a cross section of the community. It's a large number of people. And very little money for a rebate. Anyway, I just congratulate everybody around the room, but also like to just acknowledge that it's a real true connection to the community. I like seeing it. And I move approval of the report.
Yeah, and just a real quick question on that. Michelle, what is a virtual rebate? Is that something that shows up on the bill or is it I was just curious.
There's, well, first of all, good evening, everyone. There's what's called a virtual payment. So we hire a third-party vendor called AP Automation, and we give over checks to them, and they are the ones who send the checks out.
But it's paid. Okay.
It's all paid.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not a,
It's just different mechanisms.
it's not a credit on their bill or something.
Right. Yeah.
it's fine. Thank you. All right, we have a motion. Do we have a motion for this bill, this question?
George moved.
Comment.
I'll second.
Thank you. Thanks for remembering for me too.
Well,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, measure passed. To the general manager's report.
Yes, and wait for the screen to pop up. First item 5 is the status report on compliance with the cease and desist order and the Seaside Basin adjudication. What makes this report most interesting is it represents a full year. The close of the water year was September 30th. So there's a couple of instructional takeaways. There we go. And this first slide is very good news. You see the actual under Carmel River Basin, 3,347 acre feet. The legal limit is 3,376, so very close to the legal supply. Last year, the community left about 950 acre feet behind under that water right. So this is where Caroline should be commended at pretty much maxing out on its legal limit. Next slide, please. Takeaways here. Oh, back one. Is we've gotten through the whole year without taking any stored ASR water. That's the zero actual in the first column. And Sand City had some performance, but you may recall there was a 4-month period earlier in the year where there was no activity at Sand City. Next slide. Yeah.
One question on that slide.
Sure.
Monterey, pure water Monterey recovery, you got in red 40.
And that's just actual versus budget, but we did deliver the contractual 3,500 in the fiscal year. And so we always have these issues of water year versus calendar year versus fiscal year. And so the plant is producing what's needed, what's required. There's actually a surplus that went into the operating reserve. But when they budgeted for the water year, obviously it was a lower budget than we actually had pulled out.
Okay.
Yeah. The next slide is the production for customer service. This is a measure of overall demand. And the takeaway here is for the very first time, overall production for customer service or demand went under the 9,000 acre foot per year mark. This is 8,972, about 146 acre feet lower than last year. Which
The third year?
Pardon?
Is that the third year?
That's the third year in a row. We'll go to the next chart and I'll graph this out for you. This is the last 25 years. And you can see the last 3-year average, the last 5-year average, and the last 10-year average. And you can see basically we've been in a 10-year period between 9,000 and 10,000, with this past year being the first dip below 9,000. I didn't think it was possible, but apparently it was, that we have gone down 3 years in a row significantly as opposed to kind of that steady 7 years prior. So
That's wild.
yeah, well, it's a combination of things too. Keep in mind, this is production of water that goes into the distribution system. Because of the Begonia iron removal plant has treatment losses, when CalAm is starting to get down to their legal limit, there's also lower treatment losses. So you don't need to feed as much water into the system because you're not losing as much at the iron removal plant. But the numbers are actually more than just that. It's definitely part of those rebates that you're looking at, and price elasticity. You know, as water rates go up, people find ways to save. And as we issue a ton of rebates, you get more efficient clothes washers and so forth. So,
And people changing their landscape.
yep, yep. So,
I'm curious about the steep decline from 2008
yep.
to 2014 compared to the same number of years until now from there. So
Well, yeah, and that's why I said,
huge.
you know, the last 10 years have been virtually steady. I mean, obviously we have dropped another 1,000 acre feet.
Mhm.
And that's what we call hardening of, you know, the incremental impact of conservation activities gets you less and less. But there were a lot of conservation programs that were put into place, our visitor serving conservation programs went in 2002, and those had major impact. And then our CII, commercial, industrial, institutional, went in roughly, I don't know, Stephanie, you're on there about 2012.
2014-ish, but.
Yeah,
2018,
2014. And so there was just a big emphasis during those two programs to create, additional conservation savings.
Well, it's pretty dramatic.
Yep.
Very visible.
Next slide, please, Sarah. Oh, by the way, those averages that I've calculated that you see in the little box,
Yeah.
they will be different than what you see in another presentation coming up because the next presentation didn't include this past year. So, the water year, it didn't rain, obviously, this last month. We did finish above normal, about a half an inch off of what would have been considered a wet year. And then finally, next slide. On stream flow, we did have stream flowing all through the water year, and we ended up in the above normal category. And storage right now is 81% of system capacity. So as we head into winter, we're actually sitting on quite a full aquifer. I looked at the long-term climate forecast. We're still in that range of 50% could be higher than normal precipitation and 50% could be lower than normal. So we're just right in the middle. All the discussion about La Nina versus El Nino is, the long-term forecast really doesn't say what the impacts are going to be. So that concludes that compliance presentation.
Thank you.
Under other notices, Madam Chair, I'll let you kick off with the GFOA certificate if you would
Yes.
like.
Yes, I would like to. 65. I was happy to get this page everybody has to get this little note to me and with my packet. And it is the announcement that from the Government Finance Officers Association that we again have qualified for the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. It's the highest form of recognition in governmental accounting and financial reporting. So I want to say congratulations to the district. That's wonderful. And those who do this work, I'm very excited about that.
And
We're all proud of that.
specific shout out to Nikhil Bali, the
There he is.
CFO.
Mhm.
Thank you.
The credit goes to the team.
So,
It's a deep team.
Very generous.
yes.
Also in your packet was an update on the Pure Water Monterey expansion project. Some other things that are not in the packet. Tomorrow and Wednesday, we have a certified landscape irrigation auditor training. And we've got 24 people signed up, which is a real good number for this kind of program. So shout out to the Water Demand Division and their efforts there. And then just an informational item, the Water Demand Committee took up the issue of the letter that was sent to the entire board about keeping intact a credit for rainwater recovery or gray water systems. We had taken away a credit for that prior policy several years ago. And the recommendation of staff and approval of the Water Demand Committee was to leave that intact. So in other words, we do not offer a credit for stormwater systems. We still offer rebates, however. So, we would encourage people to continue to build these systems and seek a rebate.
And just for the benefit of the members of the public, the difference between a credit and a rebate in any amount is what?
Yeah, so credit, you could come in and offset putting in a new fixture. Credits like having wet water in your bank account. So if you wanted to build something. We don't find stormwater to be reliable to establish a credit.
Water credit, that's all.
Yeah, water credit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Got it.
Good. And that concludes my reports.
So next, do we have a report from any directors on anything exciting that they did? Trips, conference attendance?
Madam Chair, you skipped over
Did I skip one?
my report, which is fine.
I'd be personally
I'm so
offended if I
sorry.
were you, Mikey.
He knows
No.
I can't see. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll start off by reporting out the 2 closed sessions that we had. So the board did meet in 2 separate closed sessions on both September 16th and again on October 11th to discuss the ongoing litigation regarding Monterey Peninsula Taxpayers Association versus the district, referenced in the litigation report on page 73 as item 1B MPTA 2. That case number is HO 51128. That's the appellate court case number. In those closed session meetings, the board did receive updates from both general counsel and special counsel regarding the status of the case, and directions were given to counsel, but there's no reportable action at this time. Shifting to the general litigation report, this is starts on page 73 of your packet. You have the report of the pending litigation before the district. This memo is similar to that was provided last month, with any new information highlighted in yellow. But I did want to just briefly go over the pending cases involving the district, keeping in mind any discussion on these items would need to be set for a future closed session discussion. First off, item 1 is the MTPA lawsuits. We have a total of 6 separate lawsuits from the Monterey Peninsula Taxpayers Association. While they are separate lawsuits, they collectively challenge the various aspects of the district's collection of the water supply charge. And we've internally referenced them as MPTA 1 through 6. These cases center on the events covered under MPTA 2. Most recently, the appellate court affirmed the trial decision that the sunset provisions set forth in Ordinance 152 had been met and that the district erred in not discontinuing collection of the water supply charge. Currently, as directed, special counsel has been working with MTPA's counsel to wrap up all remaining litigation and address potential refunds and attorney's fees. That's where that resides right now. Looking at the second case before us, that's the public's ownership of Cal-Am. That's case number 23 CV004102. This pending lawsuit embodies the district's efforts to fulfill the electoral mandate of Measure J to acquire the ownership and operation of Cal-Am's water supply facilities. While this case remains in the early stages, Cal-Am did challenge aspects of the lawsuit through a demur, which was the hearing was held on August 23rd. Judge Valletta issued a tentative ruling in the district's favor, but we still have yet to receive that final ruling. We anticipate receiving that order by the November 19th case management conference, but we're at her prerogative there. In tandem, Cal-Am has requested to take General Manager Dave Stoltz's deposition in November, and that'll delve into the factual basis of the lawsuit. Shifting to our third case, this is the LAFCO case, Court of Appeal case number HO 51849. This lawsuit centers on the district's challenge to LAFCO's conduct and administrative decision regarding exercising the district's power to acquire Cal-Am. We have no substantive update on this matter, but briefing schedules will be clarified in December, roughly December 6th. We anticipate to have a clarified schedule. For City of Marina versus the California Coastal Commission, this is case number 22 CV004063. This lawsuit challenges the Coastal Commission's issuance of a coastal development permit to Cal-Am for the proposed desal plant. Briefs in this matter were filed in July and September. The latest reply briefs were filed October 3rd, and a hearing on the merits is anticipated for November 13th before Judge Wills in the Monterey Superior Court. For the CPUC matters, the district has 3 matters pending before them. This is the amended water purchase agreement, the 2022 general rate case, and the PUC acquisition rulemaking case. Regarding the water purchase agreement, the deadline extending the statutory deadline was extended to December 31st of this year. Staff and council have set several ex parte meetings to ensure the PUC commissioners have up-to-date information and understand the issues at play, but there's no real update there. Regarding the general rate case, comments have been submitted by all the parties. and the PUC issued an order extending the deadline to issue its proposed decision to March 30th of 2025. Similarly, regarding the PUC acquisition rulemaking, we're not clear where we are in the process, but the PUC did issue an order extending the statutory deadline for that to March 30th of 2025 as well. Regarding items 6 and 7 in the report, this is not a pending litigation, but it is threatened litigation. There's still the two matters, CalAm versus MPWMD. This is regarding the Aquifer Storage and Recovery Agreement, as well as the Sierra Club versus the Water District. That's regarding the attorney's fees. There's been no movement on those cases, so I don't want to dive into those, but if there is any movement, we'll be sure to let you know. That
Thank
concludes
you
my
very
report.
much.
Madam Chair, just a question. To GM, we have received on our property taxes that we will not be charged.
Right.
Could you cover that for the public, let them know we're on top of this?
Yes, and so Michael mentioned that the 6 actions, the Taxpayers Association, one of which was our appeal of the Superior Court ruling. We lost on appeal. The remedy is to sunset the collection of the water supply charge. We were able to reach the Treasurer Tax Collector's Office about a week before the bills got printed. So they took that charge off for 2024-25. Some of you may have received a notification that the charge was being taken off as a little bill insert. Oddly, I did not get one with my property tax bill, but certain of you have received it. And so that was just informing the public that it was removed. Somewhat confusingly, at the same time, certain jurisdictions now have the sewer fees collected on the property tax bill. So City of Monterey approved collection via that collection mechanism. Monterey One Water, who just left the room, did not approve collecting their sewer fee on the property tax bill, as did not the City of Seaside. So different jurisdictions will now have different information, but that is not our charge. It's not a replacement of our charge. So presently going forward for the current fiscal year, there will be no district charge.
Through the chair.
Yes.
Thank you. Going back to Melody Chrislock's initial comment, and I didn't mean to be glib when she made a comment. It's an important one. You know, I don't fully understand how this works, but one of the things that I noticed, or well, truth be told, my wife noticed on the bill and told me about it, is that she was required to forward that tax bill to our lender. So a lot of people have property tax impound accounts, myself included. I don't like getting a big bill twice a year, so we just don't think about it.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, I would say to Ms. Chrislock's point, if you don't bother telling your bank, they're going to pay it because if they don't see the updated bill. On the other hand, it will come out in the wash with a refund down the road, and it could cause confusion also with individuals, lender.
Yeah, our understanding is that none of the, well, don't say none, about 30 prepayments of the 2024-25 property tax bills had taken place. And the treasurer was going to step in front of those and issue refunds directly, which means that there should be no bills outstanding that actually have the charge on that you would need to note for the coming year. Prior year's already been paid, and that'll be part of whatever refund program we put together.
And then, I mean, I'll just go to Ms. Chrislock's question directly. Is there a, and maybe this is something we can talk about later because I know there's discussions with MPTA, but is there an opportunity for ratepayers to say, no, I'm okay paying it? Or is there just no vehicle for that?
No, there will be a claim vehicle put into place. Part of the problem is properties change hands. And so the payer has to evidence that they made the payment. because some of these amounts are so small, the likelihood of participation is low. But that probably won't stop the association from seeking some CPRE settlement fund. And so the idea that Ms. Crislock put out there is a valid idea for that settlement fund.
Right.
But that's really premature, kind of waiting on.
The answer
Next
to your
steps.
question is we're exploring all avenues and options, and we're going to be discussing it with opposing counsel to make sure whatever we do set up, they're okay with.
And just for the benefit of the public, without getting into what that's going to look like, you would agree that whatever it is, it's going to require court approval?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's,
Yeah,
there's transparency there once the
Yeah.
sausage is made.
And I'm sure we'll be reporting it out in our litigation report as well.
No, and I figured as much. I just want the public to be aware
Yeah.
that there will be transparency on the process at the appropriate time.
Correct.
And our hope is that it will be something that benefits the ratepayers and our constituents.
Yeah, I think the one thing that should be noted, Ms. Crislock did say that the money would go to the state if unclaimed,
And
which we've now learned is not the case. So it should stay local.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
thanks.
Now, do we have any reports from directors on trips, conferences?
One, briefly, I and Georgia as well attended the quarterly meeting of the Special Districts Association, which this time took place in Spreckles because we didn't have we've been meeting in Seaside, but that the facility we've been using suddenly demanded a very high price rental fee. So we met in Spreckles. For all of those of us who came from the peninsula, the ride was horrible because of to get to a 6 o'clock meeting and going on 68, it was long and very annoying. So that's not a practical location. But the good news is that we will be able to go back to using the Seaside facility, which is more, I think, better for everybody. The presentation was by a woman from the office of the county that distributes the property tax funds to educate all the recipients. And of course, education is a big one. And she explained that very, very complicated allocation process, which I'm not going to try to explain to you. To be honest, I think many of us could not follow half of the presentation in terms of the details of how it gets allocated. But the thing that I took away from it is that we are still living in a time. Prop 13 made it so difficult and complicated to fund the public schools. It really did, and we're still living with that, trying to solve that problem. And I'll stop there.
Thank you very much.
I report too on the same meeting. I was particularly interested in what, it was Rupa Shaw, that's the name of the auditor controller for the county. She kind of tweaked in a prior world, I was really close to Prop 13 being implemented and how the tax burden shifted to residential properties. It was tightened up on residential properties and loosened up on rentals and commercial properties, as I understand. But just that morning, this was just a week ago, just that morning, the Board of Supervisors agreed to join the county of Santa Cruz to raise a question about the original formula of 1978 on how they allocated funds to the jurisdictions. And the question, as I understand it, was in 1978, Prop 13 was implemented, and they fixed in place the allocation formula based on existing property tax income for separate jurisdictions, schools, cities, special districts, and so on. What the board did, which was really intriguing to me, and I'm really glad to see it, is that they want to raise the question about updating that formula, because the formula then could have said a special district A was collecting this percentage, and it's in the 0.000 factors. I mean, these are really small numbers. Nevertheless, a special district may collect a certain amount. But over the years, that special district may have grown, may have annexed more property, may have increased their obligations to the service they're doing, and others may have declined. But that formula still exists. What they want to do is go back and update the formula based on current factual information about what special districts are spending and doing, and then what are the services that they're providing. Anyway, it's a long story short. I'm just so glad to see this, because what has happened over the years is that commercial properties, which do not turn over very often, have been able to maintain a tax base that's largely doesn't change. But residential property is turning over all the time. So every time it turns over, the new value is what's the taxable base. And so slowly the tax income at the state level, but also local levels, I mean, everywhere, is that the burden of supporting public issues, public services, has fallen on residential properties in a distorted way, and has reduced the burden on commercial properties. And what they're looking to do is say, can we kind of create a little correction, course correction on this? I'm just glad to see it. But the burden is still there, that commercial properties in general, industrial owned property, privately owned properties that way, not residential, not families. They have a lesser bill. It's a percentage of the state revenue requirement, revenue source, than they used to. And residential properties have an increasing percentage than they used to. So that's the shift from residential. The burden of state government, school districts as well, has shifted the burden, tax burden, more toward residential owners and away from commercial owners. My report.
And just like to add one comment to what George explained again on Prop 13. Because property values are going up so much in Monterey County, the amount collected, of course, is going up, but not as much as we might have thought, because provision was passed, I think it was 2019, that allows people over the age of 55 and who meet certain qualifications who sell a home in a county where they are paying low taxes because of Prop 13 to bring that same tax base to, if they sell their home and buy one in Monterey, they can sort of import their reduced taxes. And so that has some, for that reason, so we have Prop 13 still as a drag on the property tax revenue. Nevertheless, it is going up. We heard that from Steve Vanini last year. That because values are increasing, the total tax revenue is going up every year. Thank you for the report. Interesting.
Public comment on his report. Discussions of Prop 13, you have to factor in different times and different lengths of time, particularly on residential property. It used to be every 7 years was a typical turnover on residential property. And before COVID hit, it was up to 9 years. The last statistic I heard during COVID was it was up to 13 years for turnover of residential property. What's happened is we're in uncharted waters since we've come out of COVID on where we're going. And I mentioned to George earlier, we're going to have Kevin Stone, the CEO of MCAR, and the Adam Pataris, his government affairs, are going to give a prediction next month for November 20th on where we're headed in 2025. We're going to hear their guess. But there's been so many changes in the length of time that people hold on to real estate. And one of the things that I've noticed this year, there have been a lot in Monterey County. There have been a lot of changes of property ownership in commercial properties. So trying to rely on old statistics that are outdated when you're trying to prove Prop 13 isn't valid anymore. I can tell you one thing for sure. If we do away with Prop 13, you want to be in the moving business because they're all going to be making a fortune. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other reports from the directors?
I got one quick report. The Water Management District had a meeting scheduled, but we didn't have a forum, so we didn't meet. I just think, so there is no report.
Not the water master, water
I'm
master,
sorry,
Water master.
water management.
That's what.
Water master. All right. We are on item number 9.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item 9 is a cleanup request relative to the salary survey adjustments that were adopted and the changes to the MOUs at your July 15th board meeting. We relooked at 3 positions as to whether or not they were appropriately compared to others in the industry. And then one of the things we noticed as an after effect was that we had 2 management positions where people actually manage 4 to 6 people that fell in line with line positions that do not manage people, which was viewed as kind of inequity and an oversight. So the recommendation here is to move 2 management positions to above the highest level single position and to modify one of the 3 staff level positions, which is the meter program coordinator, by 2 ranges. The overall impact of this change would be about $33,000 a year.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions about that or comments?
I mean, I went through this so thoroughly, but perhaps I'm incorrect in this, but I really question whether this is the sort of thing that we as a board should be dealing with.
I actually have the authority to move people and position from range to range. But because we brought you a whole package of material in July and this was part of it, I at least wanted to bring it to your attention. If you want to just delegate back to me, I'm fine with that.
Well, as I read it and was looking at questions, what the heck do I know about this?
Yeah.
And we read, got into all the reports and the attachments and everything. It was very interesting. But, I'm certainly not in a position to even know what the, what the comparisons were.
Right.
So,
Yeah. I'll just on the surface agree with you. I mean, it's a basic
but
personnel.
underneath, I really don't.
No, it's just, we showed you so much material in July, with ranges and 26 people and so forth. So I just wanted to, in the
Well,
interest of
thank you for the
completeness.
additional information.
Yeah.
Through the chair, if I may, I appreciate having the information. Because I do remember when we looked at the comparables and the analysis, and this was a few changes and you explained the reasons, and I just appreciate being informed.
I thought it made complete sense.
And through the chair, if I may, the salary increases involved in this, right?
Yes.
And we negotiated these things, and I'm glad you brought it to the board because I think we need to approve those increases.
Well,
Since it's in there.
And it does reflect $33,000 that you hadn't, that the whole salary increase wasn't really in the budget, but we had a placeholder for it. So it falls within the placeholder, but it's still, it's a significant number.
Just letting us know, and now it's all cleaned up, right?
It will be when we take action. Yeah.
Okay.
And just through the chair, so, and the salary increases are one thing, is it too speculative to budget on the OPEB consequences down the road?
It would be too speculative, and it's not much because right now, the fully loaded cost of an employee is about another 35%. Because these are already, these are just small movements. So it's not really gonna have a big impact on benefits. On the OPEB side, yeah, there's gonna, it depends how long people stay and when they retire.
But it's not something we have to budget for at this
No.
point, no.
I just appreciate the fact that you see these inequalities in the positions. That's what I appreciate. That our staff appreciates. Yeah.
Oh, I'm
yeah,
sure I'll have
it's-
at least 3 new
So
happy staffers for.
Well, I'd like to move approval just so it's confirmed because it's on the agenda, it's for an action item. Let's make it an action item, do that. And leave it to the discretion of the general manager when he wants to bring these issues before us. This is a continuation of an earlier board action. And so let's just finish the action with it. So I move to it.
I'd take it out to public comment.
Do we have any public comment on this?
Chair Anderson, I see no raised hands.
Thank you. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is passed.
The next item is related to what I'll loosely call an amnesty period for cleanup of open water permits. I think the Water Demand Committee had a fine time on this topic. So Stephanie, we'll turn it over to you.
And
Thank you.
just before she starts, brace yourself because I have questions.
Oh, my goodness. All right.
Just kidding.
So good evening, board. I'm hopeful you did have an opportunity to read the staff report and draft resolution, as my presentation is not going to go into a great amount of detail that was provided there. And I think the staff report had a lot of information. This evening, we're considering approval of a program to make a huge impact on water permit enforcement. And I'm now going to summarize that for you. As the district prepares to allocate water from the Pure Water Monterey expansion, the focus in my division, the Water Demand Division, is on resolving open permits, namely those that have not achieved a successful final inspection or have other compliance issues. There are approximately 1,600 open permits from 1993 to 2022. And if you read your staff report, you will see what the number of permits we issue per year is and what our number of inspections are. It's in the first paragraph. To facilitate the accomplishment of closing open permits, staff is recommending adoption of Resolution 2024-13. The resolution authorizes the use of the district reserve allocation and suspends specific rules for a one-year amnesty period through September 2025 for water permits issued prior to October 1st, 2022 that are in an open status in the district's permit database, as well as properties that didn't have a water permit on file and unpermitted water fixtures were found during a pre-2017 inspection. Recognizing that water from an allocation is required before an amended water permit can be issued, the use of the district reserve allocation is warranted during the amnesty period to enable permit amendments to close the books. Properties that have a previously purchased entitlement, which are those in Pebble Beach and Malpaso, would be required to use their entitlement before being able to use a district reserve allocation. Following approval of the resolution, current property owners with open permits will have the opportunity to clear their violations more easily. This will be achieved by suspending the requirement for complete construction plans and for districts having to stamp the plans as part of the permit process, suspending collection of the capacity fee, and suspending collection of fees related to permit modification and enforcement.
thus reducing the burden on property owners and encouraging them to resolve outstanding issues without facing significant financial hardship. The intended outcome is to achieve substantial compliance and close permits that will otherwise remain unresolved. So the district's Excella database program, which we've invested heavily in the last several years, is particularly capable of handling the follow-up requirement for non-compliant open permits. With the Excella program, staff is prioritizing the completion of final inspections on open permits. That's the first step in the effort to close these permits efficiently. After this initial phase of final inspections, there will be a need to follow up on the other non-compliant properties to ensure full compliance across all records. Besides final inspections of open permits, staff plans to take enforcement actions against property owners with violations, therefore filing notices of non-compliance, and enforcement against those properties that have notices of non-compliance. And finally, following up on inspections where unpermitted fixtures were documented, which require a new water permit. Staff has planned a communication and outreach strategy to notify property owners of the amnesty period with legal notices in local papers, in addition to the direct mail that's currently underway to close these permits and get final inspections, and to collaborate with the Monterey County Association of Realtors and the local planning and building departments to ensure that real estate professionals and municipal staff are well informed and can assist property owners with appropriate actions to bring them into compliance. Jurisdictions will be required to sign off on the district reserve or will have to enforce removal of unpermitted fixtures or risk a debit to their future allocation after the amnesty period. Staff has already been periodically visiting the jurisdictions to ensure they know about and are engaged in the district's inspection process and help to prevent our inspection requirement from being overlooked. And they will continue this with an ongoing priority. At the end of next September, the district will provide a summary report to the jurisdictions, giving them an opportunity to bring remaining open permits into compliance and close status before the district takes further action. These outreach efforts are designed to maximize awareness and participation in the amnesty period, ultimately leading to improved compliance and responsible water management in the community. The Water Demand Committee met October 3rd to discuss the background and classification of permits and focused on the idea of an amnesty period and the utilization of the district reserve allocation. The committee agreed to create a level playing field by incorporating the district reserve into the process. Staff was tasked at that meeting with refining and detailing the program concepts to present to the board for further consideration at this meeting. So in closing, staff recommends the board approve Resolution 2014-13, supporting closure of open permits by implementing a one-time amnesty period to help close certain open water permits and address unpermitted water fixtures by temporarily adjusting several rules and waiving fees through September 30th, 2025. I'm here for your questions.
I have a question, Stephanie. I was kind of hard-nosed, but under the suspension of page 84 is the suspension of Rule 23. If the same people that let's say put in a fixture and they didn't pay a fee for it, the same people still own the house, why wouldn't we collect something like $364 on that if the same people were there?
So
Finally,
Same question.
Huh?
I had the same
Yeah.
question.
okay, so the whole concept of this proposal is to close permits that are open that are never going to get closed or won't get closed for many years probably. And so we have a number of permits that don't have final inspections, which is our first focus. Yes, there are those people who have fixtures that have been identified. The whole concept is to try to close everything and give people a chance to do it without having to pay fees. Our capacity fee is really high. The jurisdictions don't necessarily want to give up water at this point. Many have very little, a small amount of water available. And so this is an opportunity to just open it up, get people taken care of.
So it's an expedience.
It is very much an experience, yes.
And also make it easier for people to come into compliance, I assume, and a bit of an incentive to get it done.
It's a huge incentive because if we don't take this action, essentially what happens is a continuation of what's been happening, which is we do final inspections when somebody calls us. And we've identified now 1,500 people who haven't called us. And we follow up, and if they transfer title, we do an inspection, we close, at that point, we get brought into the process, try to close the permit. The hardship is the jurisdictions don't have water just set aside to clear permit violations. And so those people don't have an option. The only option is to get compliance is basically remove the fixtures, which might mean actually opening up their walls, taking out the fixtures, having to redo walls, redo flooring, etc. And it's a very expensive, huge process. This is just a way.
Let's pause for a second, Stephanie. So, I mean, this started with why not make them pay if they're still the same property owner, and
They're not.
These are all over 7-year-old permits, pre-2017. And there are definitely some scofflaws that are probably still property owners that will be getting away with not having to pay a capacity fee. But the goal was to try to come up with a uniform program that could have the biggest basket of these and just fix them all at once. And there will be other people will complain that somebody got away with something. That's just an inevitability of an amnesty program. But yeah.
So I had another question about it, and that is that, so these people who have been, as you say, scofflaws, essentially, now they're going to get money or water from the district reserve at the expense of the person who's sitting there with their building permit but can't build the house because there's no water for them?
In a way, that's correct. So let's say there is a fixture that was not permitted. That's its ability to draw water is already in those demand numbers that we looked at earlier today. They're already in the system, so to speak. The barrier for the guy who can't get his permit right now is a lack of an allocation, which we'll talk about in 2 items.
Yes.
So that problem should go away soon. But yeah, that's just your gut feeling is a little bit of some of the inequities. And there will be, there's bound to be more than one person will say, this isn't fair. I think it's fair to our staff to close out if we can get an 80 to 90% success rate, just to kind of clean up history.
Yeah.
But all of those gut feelings you're having are real. I mean, and then there'll be a ton of them where they're on the 4th owner and somebody says, I didn't even know. Why should I be penalized for something that, somebody did 9 years ago?
20 years ago.
3 owners.
Do you have some that far back?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
just to remind the board, Actually, I kind of looked at this today because in the early 90s, when the Peralta allocation came online, the water demand division actually got cut on staffing and got cut down to 3 people right before we lifted the moratorium on new permits. And so we didn't have people to be able to go out and enforce and do final inspections. And so there are a lot of people from the 1990s and early 2000s that are in this group of 1,500 people. And what we found by sending the letters that we've started sending at this point, most of these properties are still owned by the same people that pulled the permits, and they forgot they had permits, or they didn't know they needed to schedule a final inspection. And they're very cooperative, and it's not, it hasn't been a bad situation at all. But I think if we can facilitate closing these permits, it will make such a huge difference as we move forward into our next allocation.
I have a couple questions.
Director Paul?
Thank you. Actually, I have a couple questions about staffing. Do we have enough staff? And then maybe this is actually a question for our general manager. Do we have enough staff going forward, during this amnesty period and afterwards? Will we need more staff than we have now for the inspections and the enforcement?
Well, first of all, this was a staff initiated proposal. So I commend Stephanie's staff for bringing it forward and figuring out the details. And in their view, that they are staffed to do it and they'd like to do it. It just means that
You have to
priorities will
focus.
get shifted.
Yeah.
I also, it occurs to me that progress reports would be helpful to the board, maybe quarterly or something like that, just to let us know how it's going. Is this facilitating compliance as we hope? I think that would be helpful.
I'd be happy to do that. Yes.
And is the most common, well, 2 questions. Is the most common reason for the open permit fixtures that were not permitted and unpermitted fixtures? And the other is, well, okay, I'll just let you answer that.
Okay. Unpermitted fixtures are the main reason that permits remain open. But that's not the whole picture, because you've got a lot of, and your staff report has a list of different reasons permits are open. The other primary reason is because people don't contact us when they finish the project. And we've been working very hard with the jurisdictions to have them contact us before they actually allow occupancy or final building project. And so I think, we're looking at 30 plus years going back in time. What we have today is totally different, where today the jurisdictions ask us to do inspections before they finish a project. But 20, 30 years ago, that wasn't the case. We didn't have staff, people didn't call us. And yes, properties have changed ownership. And so sometimes the new owner doesn't know they had a requirement to call us. Mm-hmm. But I think our plan right now will accommodate and accomplish some really credible closing of these permits. And I think if you can give us the opportunity, please do.
Yes. I do want to say thank you for the staff note, which was very informative, very clear. I did read it. It's very good. And I just want to call out one particular aspect of the proposal, just for the sake of everyone and mainly the public. And that is that because we have in your proposal, you say, I'm looking at page 85, that to come into compliance, the homeowner will have to comply with the standard that was in effect at the time that the permit was sought. And that strikes me as
Fair.
I mean, it's fair, it's fair. Of course, it would be much better for conservation if they had to come into compliance with current standards, but that would kind of run counter to making it easy to come into compliance, and it is certain fairness, but it's a reminder of why going forward, we don't wanna, we wanna close permits, you know, in a timely way, so we don't have this, this is not helpful for conservation efforts.
There's a huge gap and there have been so many changes in our requirements, yes.
Thank you.
I have a comment. Is there a general idea about out of 1,600 permits, how many or percentage are in unincorporated compared to incorporated jurisdictions?
That information's available, but I do not have it right now, Director Riley.
Okay, well, I do think as we automate more of our, operational needs and.
Yeah, we have the information.
Well, right, no, and I'm sure it's there, and that's not my point. I just want to compliment the value of automation because you get data that you weren't used to getting. You get it in different different comparisons that you weren't used to doing, unless you did it by hand. And I think this is where this is. I like the amnesty programs. I just think people forget. People do ignore. There are scofflaws, but I think more than likely they're just somebody just I forgot to do it. I didn't make them note.
Yeah, I didn't know.
You
Right.
forgot to do it.
Yeah. Any other questions? Right.
This has been a great conversation. On page, okay, 89 of the, which is page 1 of the draft resolution.
Okay,
There are 2 dates of import here, right?
yes.
So one is that within the scope of the amnesty, we're looking at water permits that were issued prior to October of 2022. And then the second date is unpermitted fixtures, which were found
Inspected by 2027 or 17.
prior to 2017.
Yes.
And help me understand what the response would be under the goal of equity here. I mean, the best that we can, obviously, it's never 100% equitable with amnesty because all good things must end, right? So if somebody were to say, well, hey, my fixture was found in January of 2018, or my water permit was issued in January of 23, why am I on the outside looking in? The response or the retort from you would be?
So the 2022, the easier date, a water permit is valid for 2 years. And so one would expect the project to be completed within 2 years, and they would have called us for a final inspection. So that was that date. The 2017 date is a little more question for you as a board member, but selected because in 2017, so we have our administrative assistant who was hired during COVID, who has gone back as far as 2017 to contact all of those people who had open permits already. So the same process we're going through right now. Contacted those people, asked them what the status of the permits were, tried to get final inspections, et cetera, et cetera. And so if they had an inspection after that date, yes, potentially they could have had water fixtures unpermitted without a permit. But I think we're just looking at dates, hard dates that we could find. The 27 from 2017 to today, they have either responded that the project wasn't done, they've either had a final inspection, or they ignored us, and we've already recorded a notice of non-compliance.
And then that was my question. Thank you. And then I think this is really important for your amnesty program to be successful. is to do in some form or another, all the outreach to all of the stakeholders that would help to get the word out so that these people can either get in touch with the district so that you can have a successful close rate, let's say within the next year. Do you have a budget for that? For outreach?
So as far as outreach goes, so as the staff report said, we have a couple different projects or plans in mind. One is publishing public notice. Second is we are sending letters to these people. So obviously we're contacting them multiple times actually, because we send a letter saying we need to do an inspection, close your permit. They don't respond, we're sending them a second notice. If they fail, they're getting notice. So there's a constant communication going on. We also plan to communicate and meet with the Monterey County Association of Realtors, because realtors are a huge part of everything we do, and educate them about the permit process. They call us all the time to find out what the status is of the property. We will share the information with them about how to clear the permit. And then we will also be meeting with the jurisdictions to share what they need to know to approve use of district reserve or to make enforcement on their own. And then I think the final thing is that if we get to the end of the day, which would be the end of September next year, that we're sending the jurisdiction a report saying we contacted all of these people and they were all notified about this. Some people didn't respond. These people all have notices of non-compliance. If they don't fix this jurisdiction, and if you don't help us fix this at that point, because the jurisdiction ultimately is going to be on the hook, at that point, we're going to come back and we're going to clear these permits by debiting a jurisdiction's allocation and collecting the fees.
Got it. All right, but you don't need a
But we
budget.
have budget.
But you
No,
don't
there's
need a
no budget.
budget.
I don't think there's a budget needed in this case, no.
We have enough, and there's two different outreach baskets. So
There's enough,
we
there's
have enough
plenty
there.
Yeah.
Wow, that was dense.
Sorry.
No, it's just important, I think, that if we're gonna do this, that,
It's a big deal, yes.
well, right, that we, and I know you will, and I'm trying to figure out how else we could support you to make sure that within a year or less, we're not really knocking on the jurisdiction's door very
No,
much.
but my staff is very committed right now. They've already spent a lot of time. In fact, an example is when we first ran the numbers on these open permits, we had 7,000 plus open permits. And we divvied up those 7,000 permits, and my staff each took a bunch of them and they went through and they figured out where they could close because we had stuff that we could close. So we are solid on our 1,500, and we have 500 approximately that have deed restricted notices of non-compliance. And then there are basically an unknown number, but probably a smaller number of inspections that were done where they found unpermitted fixtures. And so that is our plan, and we just want to close this out before we move forward.
Well, let me just close by saying thank you for being patient with us, and I think that Karen made the point. I think a lot of us made the point, including you, Stephanie. It's a way for us to be able to be as visible as we can to understand the staff recommendation and to be at the same level that staff is in understanding that the equity, anytime you're having amnesty, you got to look at equity. And it looks like you guys did a great job. But we were just trying to get up to was excellent.
Yeah. Support, they appreciate very a ton went into up with the perfect it, considering all the issues, and then you've just explained you've been clearing,
Thousands.
you,
as we get to item 12,
Yeah.
we'll have 1,000 acre feet by early spring.
Okay, but what I want to know is this. Are we committing all the reserve to this program?
No,
So, okay, we're not committing all of it?
correct.
Okay.
And
So
Director
somebody-
Edwards,
Yes,
I actually asked that question to my staff. Many of these permits that we're talking about are minuscule amounts of water. And so I think that we're like, right now we have 8 acre feet. We don't think we're even going to approach that in the near future. So I think it will be less than anybody possibly thinks.
okay, I just want to know because if we commit this, somebody come through the door like, I want to use community hospital, I want some
Right.
water,
Yep.
because they used to doing that.
Well, and you may get a couple,
Community hospitals, okay.
Well,
No,
no,
but-
I know they okay, but
there's a
I
couple
just
of
use them.
affordable housing projects that are
Thank
looming out
you.
there who might
Might want to
come,
knock on the door and,
that are remodels of existing facilities. But item 12, when we talk about allocation, the timeline for allocation of water is basically February. And there's no way they're going to close out all these in the amnesty period by February. So
okay.
Just one question. You talked about, you've been working on this for a while and you cleared a whole bunch of them, numbers wise. How long have you been doing this project?
Well, we actually started doing it several months ago because we're prepping
That's
for a
fine.
new allocation and we thought we needed to focus in. But the whole point was to try, so we have new databases, which is discussed in your staff report. And so we ran a report on these open permits, and then we went back through all of our old data, and we were able to clear, obviously, a large number of open permits. But the concept has been, we have a new allocation coming. We don't want to have open permits. And we can close it now. So that's our goal.
Thank you.
well, after public comment, I'd like to move for approval.
I'll second it.
Do we have any public comment?
Chair Anderson, I see no raised hands.
Thank you. Okay, it's been moved and seconded.
Roll call.
Roll call vote.
Does it need to be roll call?
We should do roll call.
It's a resolution.
Director Adams,
Aye.
Director Eisenhart,
Aye.
Director Paul,
Yes.
Director Edwards,
Yes.
Vice Chair Riley,
Aye.
Chair Anderson.
Yes.
Resolution is adopted 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
okay, item 11
Yes.
is consider approval of funds for an executive search firm for the recruitment of the assistant general manager. There is a typo in the table that appears in your staff note. Murray has an A in it, AY. But other than that, the staff note speaks for itself. Our HR coordinator looked at the capabilities of our outside consultant, RGS, who's assisted with our accountant search, wide variety of staffing searches. But we believe that an executive search firm is more appropriate for this type of search. We had no budget for it, so we are here in front of you today, asking for an amount not to exceed $37,000. I think the two preferred vendors are Murray and Ralph Anderson. But the other one has been used by Monterey One Water and are reputable as well. So we'll relook at all the credentials.
Thank you. Madam Chair.
Yes.
I just wanted to say that the county has used Bob Murray and Associates to great satisfaction.
Oh, good.
In fact, they are the ones that found Sonia De La Rosa for us, who was just really amazing as our county administrative officer. The person who we had been working with is a person with the firm named Gary Phillips. And I'm thinking he may have gone out on his own. I'm not sure he's still there, but we were very pleased. Bob Murray and Associates. Maybe it's inappropriate for me to make any comments like that, but you know, if you've had the experience of, like, I should pass the information along.
Thank you.
Well, I read all these proposals, and I was just gonna say that that's the one I was most impressed with. That their
Yeah.
proposal was,
I think our HR coordinator is leaning that direction as well.
well,
To
this
the
is-
chair. When?
Well,
Deadline. First of the year?
if you approve this, well, so that's the other issue. We're heading into the Thanksgiving, Christmas
That's
season. and It's
right.
a tough time to do the search, so it'll be based on the recommendation of the selected search firm.
First of the year? Tell
Okay. Think of the money we save.
them. Well, hey, first. I move approval if no questions from the public.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, do we have any questions from the public?
Chair Anderson, I see no raised hands.
Thank you. Have a vote, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion is passed.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, as Director Edwards can attest, the door to the office has been moved, and so there's an office waiting.
It's awesome there.
been talking about it for a while. It's good. Okay, where are we?
Okay, this is item 12. An overview of the proposed 24-25 water allocation process. The staff note has some background in it. The key amongst all of those events is we held a meeting September 12th of all of the jurisdictions. There were 5 city managers here, planning directors, representatives of the service branches, and the airport. So very good turnout. It was an arduous meeting, about 2 hours. That's where staff got the detail on how we do our business. Now we're starting visits to city councils and the board of supervisors and the airport board to give them an overview of our proposal. We'll report back to you at the November board meeting and if necessary at the December board meeting if there's any policymaker pushback. But right now, generally speaking, there's been very little. I have a meeting set up with the city of Delray Oaks later this week to talk about their kind of special circumstances of being so small and seemingly reliant on Marina Coast Water District with the Fort Ord lands. But we'll talk a little bit about that. So with that, next slide, please, Sarah. So the district's history is in the 80s. We actually assigned, and this pieces of the water pie graphic came from that period of time. We actually said, here's how much water there is, and each jurisdiction was given an amount. So it was as if we assigned all the supplies proportionately to the jurisdictions. In 85, we started doing the review of building plans, and that's when Stephanie talks about water permits. In order to get a building permit, you need a water permit, and we look at pre-project and post-project. If there's an incremental increase in water use at a site, you have to show where that water is going to come from. And once it's agreed that we know where it's coming from, typically a jurisdiction's allocation, they sign a water release form. So that process has been in since 85. When the right around the time that the Peralta well was coming online, and there was a look at how much water could actually be pumped from the river without mitigation. It was basically determined that all 5 scenarios would require mitigations. That allocation EIR basically said we need to determine future supplies and then come up with a program to allocate those supplies. And with the Peralta well, we began to allocate water. Why do we allocate water? Next slide, please, Sarah. Simply scarcity, the order 9510 and the cease and desist order. And tracking new demand for water is what we've learned through time is by having this permit process, you get a front view of where the water's going. So you don't just treat it in the aggregate and wait until you say, oh, we've used up 80% of our supply. Don't know where it went, but now we better plan for a new supply. This way you really do know which jurisdiction, what types of residential, non-residential, and so forth. Next slide, please. And the allocation is not as if we're giving the jurisdictions water to go play with. It's like a bank account. And we place an allocation into the account. That's a credit. And then as building permits are pulled and water permits are pulled, the jurisdiction issues a water release form. They come to us. We debit the account. And when that account gets close to 0, we will consider another allocation process. Next slide. So this is the permit cycle. A developer or a homeowner draws the plans, counts what new water is going to be needed, gets a water release form from the city or the county, obtains a water permit from us. We debit the allocation. Then they go get their building permit. They build the project. And then we do final inspection. And if the final inspection yields a result that is different than what got permitted, like our open permit discussion, you might have an unpermitted fixture, or you may have put in too few. You said you were going to do this and you did less. And we'd like to see that water that was allocated for that go back to the jurisdiction. So we'll make minor corrections based on the final inspection. So what brings us to allocation of new water today? Well, obviously it's the Pure Water Monterey expansion project. It's you saw from the staff note in item 6. It's still scheduled to come online around this time of next calendar year. So we're trying to get ahead of the game. It's 2,250 new acre feet. Next slide, please, sir. So our schedule overall, I mentioned the September 12th meeting. Tonight we're doing the update. I've got meetings set up pretty much with every city. I was originally on the supervisor's agenda for tomorrow, and they canceled that last week, and they're going to reschedule it. So, but anyway, we'll be doing those meetings. I mentioned reporting back to you. The goal is if the waters are calm, that we will have a first reading of an ordinance at the December board meeting. And that would result in a second in January and then effective in February. And at that point in time, all unallocated water will go into the district reserve. Now, the allocations really aren't going to settle much. The cease and desist order will still be out there, the moratorium on setting of new meters. So to the extent the jurisdictions want to encourage housing and job growth, we really do need to focus on lifting the moratorium. So separately, I'm going to organizations. Like last week, I went to the Association of Realtors Government Affairs Committee to talk about trying to work hand in hand in lifting the CDO up to the state when that time comes, probably right after the first of the year. Which means only only remodels or renovations on sites with existing meters will be moving forward. You might see that translate to tearing down one unit and putting in a fourplex or something like that. So there may be some projects of benefit, but you won't see large scale projects until new meters can get set. The other reason for getting started on this allocation process was to at least let the jurisdictions know that they would have water so that they could work with developers on a kind of a long-term lead time basis. So takes us to the question of how much water is there to allocate? And this chart is just a basic list of all the sources of supply and how much water is available from those supplies. I can tell you that there are two areas of disagreement. Michael mentioned earlier the PUC. It's really called phase 2. It's the supply and demand analysis we've talked about in front of you before, where all the public agencies are in disagreement with Cal-Am over the value of the supply of the expansion and the value of aquifer storage and recovery. These are the numbers that we carry forward on those two. So ASR, for example, 1,210 acre feet is a 59-year average of what would be available based on recorded rain data. And then the 2,250 acre feet, Cal-Am in its testimony said, oh no, in drought, that's 0 to 1,100. And there's reasons for the discrepancies. Let's just put it that we're more confident in these numbers than we are in the testimony that was filed by California American. So all total, there's about 12,112 acre feet of available supply in an average year. How much is needed to meet current demand? Well, this is where I showed you a new chart. This is the old chart, and we're going to stick with the old chart for two reasons. This is what we've shown everybody at the jurisdictions, and it's also a little higher than the new chart. So a little factor of safety built in. So we're using the last 5 years prior to this year. So 9,557 acre feet of demand. So how much of that demand, the 1,200 of supply, I'm sorry, 12,000 of supply versus the 9,000 of demand is excess for allocation? Well, we do want to say that there are factors affecting our thinking. The Seaside Basin needs a replenishment for the deficit that the standard producers have built up. Cal-Am has repeatedly linked a 25-year, 700 acre feet per year in lieu recharge to the successful completion of the desalination plant. If the desalination plant doesn't go forward, then we have to consider where that 700 acre feet per year might come from. At the same time, the pure water expansion can be a little bit less in dry years. And it's less in the summer, and then you can make up some of it in the winter, or what we call the shoulder periods. But there would be a 200 acre foot deficit in dry year, multiple dry years, and so forth. Demand could fluctuate based on weather and economy. We just showed you where demand is under 9,000, that 8,972 number. It could bounce back to a couple hundred acre feet. Better economy, new hotel comes online, new people coming, So we never want to get too narrow. There are losses. So the concept is we'll initially leave a factor of safety of 1,000 acre feet. I can tell you that we've got about 5,000 acre feet in storage right now, split between the operating almost ASR water. So we're starting in a pretty good position. So then if you take that total 12,000 and change of supplies available, the 5-year demand number, you have just over 2,500 of available. That leave behind of 1,000. We're in effect saying there's 1,559 acre feet that could be allocated. So then we went and we looked at, in our view, how much does each jurisdiction need? And, water demand forecasting is really kind of 3 simple questions. How much do I use today? How fast am I going to grow? And then at whatever future date in the future at that growth rate is how much I'm going to need for that next period of time. So what we did is we relied heavily on the AMBAG growth forecast. We've been doing that for about 4 years, 5 years now in our supply and demand forecasting. It means we don't have to hire a bunch of econometricians. We can rely on somebody else's. It's a fairly rigorous model that's been vetted against other models. So we, in effect, said, let's use the AMBAG population model to determine a growth rate on the residential use of water. And let's use the jobs growth rate as a proxy for the non-residential water use. And then we did a survey to the service branches and the airport because their separate use is not projected in the models. Water demand last 20 years. Well, we've just seen the last 25 years earlier. We can skip that one. But proportionate water demand today, residential use is about 66%. Non-residential use, the other 34%. And then you can see by jurisdiction how it splits up. And one interesting example there is Sand City, where they have very little residential demand, barely registers on the pie chart, but they've got significant non-residential use, which makes sense for any of you Target shoppers or Costco shoppers. Next slide is, how fast will we be growing? I've already mentioned the growth forecast. So each city, I've put down in the second column of numbers, third column overall, their residential growth rate and their non-residential growth rate based on the 25-year regional growth forecast that AMBAG produces. The current demand, which you see in the first column of numbers, sums up to the 9,557, the 5-year demand amount. And then there's this category called residential acre feet served by others. Well, this is why we didn't have our meeting until September 12th. We waited for the county's draft housing element, which changed quite significantly from its early draft, and the city of Monterey adopted a different housing element in July. So those two shifted a lot of water use between properties that would be developed in the old Fort Ord, which would be Marina Coast Water District, and properties that would be developed in the Cal-Am service area. And so you can see, for example, in the city of Monterey, 0 acre feet served by others, whereas in their original housing element, they had 1,200 units over here in the old Fort Ord. So it was important for us to know what were we dealing with. Is it Cal-Am's to serve, or is it Marina Coast to serve? Because that will have an impact on who should get water and where. So the big numbers, Delray Oaks, they have 1 buildable lot in Delray Oaks. And so almost all of their regional housing needs allocation and population growth is going to be served by housing developed in the old Fort Ord. So that's residential acre feet served by others. Seaside, Campus Town, as an example, is the Marina Coast service territory. So they have a large number of housing units served by others. And then the unincorporated is kind of an interesting one, because in this case, it's things like September Ranch that have their own water supply, or the Rancho Cañada Villages project, which has its own water right that's going to be picked up by Cal-Am and delivered. So we treat that also as water served by others. So we had to make adjustments in the residential forecast, but that where we are today, plus the growth rates, minus served by others, gives you what your 25-year need is based on our analysis. Now, this next chart is designed to remind us of what we discovered when dealing with AMBAG's numbers. AMBAG does 3 major things: a regional growth forecast, which we sought to rely on every 4 years. The same 4 years, they do the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, Sustainable Communities Strategy. That's a 25-year plan. And then every 8 years, they do the regional housing needs allocation. And by law, they're all on the same cycle so that they're supposed to be consistent with each other. All of AMBAG's documents are self-referencing as if they included all of the information in each document. But the problem we recognized when we went out there is there's some significant disconnect in population versus housing. So we looked at housing by the 4 categories in the regional growth, in the regional housing needs allocation. So very low income, moderate, and above moderate. And we determined what type of housing mix you could expect for that, the number of fixtures that would be in the number of bathrooms, serving the number of bedrooms, and so forth. So we said, okay, under the false assumption that a home uses water absent its people, how much water would the housing needs for each of the housing elements for each of the jurisdictions require? So on this chart, you see the population growth in Carmel, 35 people over 25 years, but the RENA number is 349 units. And you can see all the way down the jurisdictions, that kind of disconnect, either one higher, the other lower, or one lower, the other higher. So to adjust for that, as I mentioned, we just looked at what houses would use for a mixture of the housing stock. And for lack of a better methodology, we added the water for people or population and the water for houses and divided by 2. And that's the number that we ended up using for the residential sector need. And I know you laugh every time because it's so scientific.
Right. And what did AMBAG say when you pointed this discrepancy out?
Well, so we haven't gone to them to really point it out, but the city of Monterey's brought it up and some others, and it's percolating up now. I think it has to be changed in the next cycle, but that's 8 years away, or at this point, six years away. So what would that future need be based on population growth? That's the 25-year need per AMBAG, or adjusted for RENA, that's the add them together, divide by 2 plus non-residential. And you can see that they're different. You can see that it's a bigger number, but 1,034 is still less than 1,559. So what we're talking about is the total need over a 25-year period, estimated in this fashion, is less than the amount that's available for allocation, even with taking that 1,000 acre-feet of factor of safety out. So we feel pretty confident that if we do a first allocation of only a portion of this, that we're going to be in pretty good shape. And so the last question is, how much will we need in the future? I think I actually answered that on the last chart. But what we had proposed is we take that 25-year water need from that last chart, totaling the 1,034 in total, and then allocate a third to each jurisdiction to get them started. Now, I mentioned that Delray Oaks gave me pause because it's such a small number that a third would be like 3 acre-feet or 2.7 acre-feet. And it just doesn't feel right, because you could end up with a lot of accessory dwelling units, ADUs. They could change their minds and develop some of that lot below City Hall, the big storage yard. It just seemed like a super low number. And in fact, in our meeting later this week, I'll probably entertain even 100% allocation of 8 acre-feet, because yes, most of their housing is going to be in the Marina Coast Service Territory, but 4 just seems too low. I mean, really, it does. So that's the only unusual one on the jurisdiction side. For the airport and the service branches, we are proposing a 50% of their stated need from their survey. So you get a draft proposed allocation. And then you have certain jurisdictions that still have an unused allocation from the prior allocation process. We've elected to leave those intact They will be adjusted for whatever their situation is as of the final date of adoption of our ordinance. So, even today, somebody will come in for those jurisdictions that have an allocation. They may have a water release form for very, very small project. So we're still debiting their account, and we will up until we adopt the ordinance. But whatever's there remains theirs to use. And that'll be added to these proposed allocations. And so you can see the draft total allocation, and that's what I'm taking out to the various city councils and the board as our proposal to them. And hopefully, when I report back to you, it is all smooth sailing.
Just the last column.
Just the last
Just the
column.
last
Yep.
column.
And again, the whole idea is to give them, so on more than one occasion, I've told people, I'm tired of forecasting what the world would be like after we lift the cease and desist order and lift the moratorium. Let's get there. So let's put water in the hands of folks. Let's focus on lifting the moratorium. The beauty on the moratorium is that either with a desal plant, Pure Water Monterey expansion is a bridge to that desal plant, or if you don't believe a desal plant is needed, Pure Water Monterey for the near term years has more than enough water to do what it needs to do. So we will not be in trespass, or Cal-Am will not be in trespass under the water code. And so they meaning the regulators, be able to lift the cease and desist order based on the facts that are current, plus this 5-year period of surplus or longer. And so I think, that's our focus, get water in the hands of the jurisdictions, then focus on lifting the moratorium, and then let's see things actually get built. That's it.
Yes. What kind of feedback have you gotten from the jurisdiction? Questions, concerns?
Yep. So the first one, so City of Monterey, let's talk about them for a second. They had concerns that AMBAG's job growth rate may be double counting. And I said, well, then we would be overstating how much water you need. That's not a bad thing. So let's just stick with what we got. And then they also made a very helpful suggestion. We may have created the impression that future allocations were going to be just first come, first serve. And that's not the case. A future allocation will require another allocation process that will go through the board. All the jurisdictions will participate. So it's not just like, city of Seaside use up all their water and we're just going to give them more right away. And whoever comes in with their hand extended, there should be a process. There will be a process. Then the other one was City of Seaside, who said, well, we just increased our downtown density. And so it may be understating what our population will be in the Cal-Am service area. And I think that's mitigated by us saying, hey, we're doing a third of what we see the need to be. If you grow faster than we expected, it'll show up in your need and we'll do another allocation process. But our allocation process is not to just reward the fastest growing community. It's to have everybody revisit. And you can sit there with everyone in the room and say, these two communities are growing faster than you all are. We need to make an allocation, but let's get everybody on board for that. So those were the only two kind of concerns. And then, as I said, my own concern about making sure Delray Oaks has sufficient water if they're ADU to Marina Coast Water District ratio were to change. So.
No question?
Yes.
For 2 or 3? This is great. Focus in on a couple of things. I remember there was some discussion, I think it was last month, when Mayor Oglesby was here. So the Seaside probably comes in first in my mind, and I could be naive about this, as a community, as a jurisdiction that has a lot of room for improvements of existing housing stock.
Yeah.
And I heard what you said, that any extra unused acre feet credit is not going to go away with the new allocation. So just to be clear, those homeowners who are still living with one bathroom in their home, they're in a better position with that jurisdiction. It depends on the jurisdiction, obviously the government, local government, but they'd be in a better position. I mean, I'm particularly concerned with Seaside. I think Seaside has the most need for upgrading their existing housing stock. I could be wrong, but certainly it's one of them.
And I think what we found out in this process is that different cities have different priority policies.
Yeah.
Andy Myrick was clear that, hey, it hadn't been a priority to get an extra bathroom. So we've got a long list of folks who want that extra bathroom. Our hope is that nobody rations their allocation, because in our view, there's more than enough water out there. So start taking care of your things. But yes,
I know, but I feel like, but all we can do is allocate. We can't tell.
That's where our
Seaside
job
what to
stops.
do.
Exactly.
Right.
And
Yeah.
But second bathroom protocol is always there for them.
say that again, Stephanie.
So somebody who has one bathroom in their house, that the house was built prior to 2000,
Right.
can always add a second bathroom without.
Yeah, we have this protocol that, as a convenience, you can get a second bathroom.
I appreciate that, but and I didn't mean to say it was only one bathroom house stock. I mean, these are older kitchens and older.
But the older houses can get upgraded right now.
On the bathrooms. Yeah. That was one thing. So I like the idea that we're not reallocating unused credits. And is that new, by the way? Is that a new policy?
No, well, yes. I mean, as a result of the board conversation that night.
Yeah.
And I think we talked about it. So it's not a fight worth having.
Yeah.
Even though kind of in our minds, it would have been the time to just redraw the start line.
Yeah.
But just as we are taking this permit cleanup amnesty out of the district reserve, if that number even became significant, it would be the last water, not the first water. So the goal right now is to equip the jurisdictions with the first water.
Well, I support that change in the policy, even if it's just a one-off for this time around. I mean, second thing was airport and defense. So defense came in to the board earlier this year, building a new structure. Airport's looking at doing some significant work.
Yeah.
I don't know what that timeline is, but it's sort of
the new terminal. The airport's got a terminal plus some other ancillary buildings. They had to relocate a fire building.
Right.
But they did a fairly thorough analysis. And then Marlena, who's here, coordinated all three service branches: Navy, Presidio, Coast Guard,
including project,
the Naval Innovation Center.
Correct.
Yep. So we think we're covered pretty well there.
Okay. And then you mentioned the cease and desist order. I don't want this to be, I'm looking for a short answer here. Just right now, the stakeholders that, if there are any that are still a prevailing headwind for us on getting the regulators to lift that are, I mean, we don't have enough time.
Just Josh.
Just Josh? JJ? Just Josh?
I'm spending time with, I mentioned MCAR, the realtors, next Monday, the Peninsula Chamber. I can't remember when I've got MCHA. I've already met with the Coalition of Peninsula Businesses. The goal is to see if we can't find some common ground, because this expansion is the nearest, best, fastest path to lifting the cease and desist order. which is a precursor to lifting the moratorium. So as I said earlier, you can be agnostic as to the need for a desal plant or no need. The conditions for which the state regulators can keep you in jail have changed. And so if you're not doing the crime, you shouldn't do the time is kind of my mantra. And when the expansion comes online, you'll have 4 years running of no trespass. And the promise of the expansion, as you begin to look at these numbers, is worst case, you won't be in trespass for 5 to 10 years. Best case could be decades. So it'll be very, very difficult for the State Water Board to maintain a position of the CDO is an enforcement tool to ensure that you do not trespass. And that's the next big initiative.
Okay. That was it. All my questions are answered. Thanks.
I had a question on just the Monterey number. Kind of seems like Monterey is built out. So what's the rationale for, I mean, I know historically they've talked about a big number or a pattern of, larger changes over time. Do they still expect those significant changes over time for this much water?
Well, so that's the interesting thing. The example where population was like 1,400 people, 25 years, but housing 3,654. Disconnect. Similar to Seaside, you can upzone your downtown, which they've done, and do infill. But it also has a lot to do with how aggressive city council. Monterey is very aggressive. However, I think that once you get your first 360 units built, it feels pretty good. Once you get 700 built, you're only at 20% of that RENA number, and you're going to begin to go, where's my next developer who's got a project that's going to make a big dent? So even if you've got opportunity sites, you're going to run out of opportunity developers, and you have to ensure profitability, or you have to find a foundation, or you have to do something to make it profitable.
But your approach was not so much to predict the future, but to make AMBAG be the predictor of the future, and you just made the best numbers work out on jurisdiction.
Yeah, and without the detail here, I think the jurisdiction staff at our September 12th meeting got to see where AMBAG talks about how they tested their model against the Department of Finance's model. But there's even some question whether, this last adopted population forecast did not necessarily start with the census, the most recent census. So the next one will.
Oh.
So your output's only as good as your input. And I always kind of quip that, okay, if your model gave you statistically significant results compared to 3 other models, that's great. That means it's a good model at mimicking other models. But has anybody taken all 4 of them and saw how it was up against the actual outcomes? 5 years after the model results, 10 years after the model results. And I don't have an answer to that, but what we've seen in urban water management plans is, and no offense intended, but the Cal-Am urban water management plan from 15 years ago didn't predict the 15th year, the 10th year, or the 5th year very well. The urban water
Yeah, I can't fault you for relying on AMBAG data rather than developing.
One of the staff level people also got to see was the meeting between the jurisdictions and AMBAG. So when somebody says, we have 3 hotel projects, you met AMBAG 3 times. Did about it. Yeah, obviously you're supposed to tell them everything that you're thinking, and what might impact job growth. And
the answer is what?
the answer is there's still some dispute over the quality of AMBAG's forecasting by a couple of jurisdictions.
But we used AMBAG because going back, 8 years ago, we wanted some.
Yeah.
So he looked at plenty of agencies and we decided on AMBAG.
Well, and the first time we got pushback, I said, the door is open for. Even if you assume the above moderate would be second homes and maybe not inhabited, if you built 250 low, very low, or moderate, you're going to get 500 new people.
Yeah.
Well, that's bigger than 35. What am I supposed to plan for as a planner? So it does matter. And then this, served by others issue, which again is why we waited for the housing elements to get done, because Monterey moved. They still have housing planned for South Boundary Road, but it's now in their buffer. So it's in their housing over and above their RENA number. We're only looking at the housing to meet the RENA number. So we kind of stopped there and we said 0 for outside of the urban boundary. Who knows who will be right,
Any other questions from the board? When do they? Looking at all this again?
Well, so they're on a 4-year cycle, so they'll adopt a new regional growth forecast in 2026. And also a metropolitan transportation plan. And so the metropolitan transportation plan is a 25-year look, and what it's supposed to, in effect, say or do is a transportation infrastructure sufficient to meet the population growth and job growth that we're about to see? And so the first attachment to that 25-year plan, it's always titled something like Looking Forward 2045 or some name like that. The first attachment is always the regional growth forecast. And so you can go in there and they'll take the overall, they have 3 county responsibility, but they do the forecast only for Santa Cruz County and Monterey County because San Benito County has its own council of governments. But then they'll take these big numbers and then they'll break them into jurisdiction by jurisdiction. So you get to see how they predict different growth rates for different communities. So in our case, for the unincorporated amount of the county that sits in our service area, when we did the population work, we just said, they can't grow any faster than the city of Monterey. So let's use city of Monterey's population growth rate. We had a number for population in the Caroline service area. So we just grew that number. And then we grew the water usage at the same growth rate. But then when the housing element came out, they flipped that on its head because they bought into the policy goal that you need to create housing closer to where the jobs are. Well, that's different than assuming the same population growth rate as City of Monterey. So it's a much higher number when you do that. So there's stuff that we didn't want to act until everyone else had acted on, in this case, the housing numbers, but also where that housing goes.
There are two places where there might be a course correction. One is the experience of the 1/3 allocation and let that kind of drive the next allocation. So you got actual experience on the one hand. And the other is that MBAG will be in another couple of years or so, be putting out some new information or new analysis of data. That whether that's new information or not, that's kind of the question. But anyway, that's another potential course correction.
Yep.
When that hits the public.
Yeah.
Done shooting the breeze. Yeah.
You're patient.
Good evening, Tom Raleigh. I experienced Mr. Stoltz's presentation at the Board of Realtors last Thursday at our local government relations committee meeting. By the way, my name is Tom Raleigh. I'm Vice President of the Taxpayers MPTA, but I'm also a realtor. I used to deal in commercial real estate, particularly in downtown Monterey, PG, and Carmel. I gave it up because of lack of water. I gave it up around 2005. I've been pretty much stuck to residential real estate since then. I do mostly property management. I don't do much listing and sales, although I do have a house for sale in Casanova, Oakville, in case anybody's interested. And we just lowered the price to $950, 3-bedroom, 2-bath with a nice master suite with a hot tub. But anyway, I disagree with you. Monterey has some big sites on Garden Road. At least 3 are vacant right now that were commercial sites. A 4th site had the fire recently. So it's not just Seaside that needs water for construction, because these were commercial buildings. And when I asked the Seaside City Council, what about the jobs housing balance? You're doing away with 4 major commercial properties on Garden Road. And they said, no, we're going to do a blanket thing. We're going to convert it to housing. They did not consider anything about the impacts. Yeah, it's going to create hopefully affordable housing. So 2 years ago, they went to State Water Resources and said, we'd like to have you give a waiver and give us, supposedly your excess water that you have here at the Water Management to use it for affordable housing. State Water Resources said no. There really isn't much change since then. This report is wishful thinking. 7 out of 10 years are dry years. We've had 2 out of 5 here have been wet years. The same time we've had restrictions because of COVID-19. We've had great reductions on commercial visits. And I believe the closest we are is we're up to like 70% for next year on our bookings. We're still below what pre-COVID bookings are for the economy. And that's for visitors. So the other thing is, I question this report. Page 11, he's got 2250 for pure water expansion. How much water is there? That's not even going to happen till the end of next year. That's page 11. Aquifer storage and recovery 1210. That's not even the average for the last 10 years. That's a phony number. 200 acre feet for Sand City desal. If you put the actual production since that project was created, it's way lower than that. So the thing is, you're dealing with wishful thinking with this report, which he's did a great job if you want to be wishful thinking. The last thing, if you look at the chart on page 17, the last 3 years have been during the COVID restriction. So the thing is, when you're dealing with data that is wishful thinking, you're going to come up with wishful thinking results. And the thing is, you guys, we need to have some confidence that you guys are asking tough questions. I didn't see any tough questions. You just suck up everything he puts out. He knows all the numbers backwards and forwards. So he can diddle you guys forever on these numbers. So you guys need to really toughen up and start asking some tough questions. Thank you.
To the chair. Jim, can you comment on any of that if you want to, or I know you probably don't want to, but.
Well, yeah,
I should.
I don't know how long you want to drag this out, but.
No, not too long. but you-
According to the convention
some
and
of it.
the C Monterey folks, every presentation I've gone to, the occupancy rate is at or above the same rate it was pre-COVID. The revenge travel that happened post-COVID gave us a big bump.
I like that, revenge travel.
Yeah. The aquifer storage and recovery number is based on 59 years worth of hydrologic data, including droughts and non-droughts. And you can reorder it and do Monte Carlo simulations all you want. We do have some concern that if we don't build that third injection well, or ASR 3 and 4 aren't returned to injection well status, that we won't be able to sustain 1,210. It'd be more like 75% of that or 80% of that. Sand City desal has been a laggard, but we're still waiting for DDW to permit the new source water well. So the assumptions in all these numbers are there is a new source water well, that the injection capacity at ASR is what the injection capacity is supposed to be. The constraints of coming up over the ridgeline and not being able to use Monterey pipeline, that's built into those numbers. Those numbers, that 1,210, that comes from a CalAm report that they submitted as testimony. We used to use the number 1,300. But we said, well, shoot, let's just use CalAm's own data. That's close enough. And so we decreased our numbers to what was demonstrated in that report. What that testimony failed to include was the impacts of storage, and ours includes the impacts of storage, which is how you operate. That's the S in ASR. So anyway, that being said, these numbers are significantly vetted and believable. Climate change could change certain things, but that's why we're starting small. And you saw that, realistically with these numbers, there's 2,559 acre feet to allocate. Our calculated need are 1,034 acre feet with that add together, divide by 2 treatment on housing, residential water use. So the difference between the two is if you're wrong on supply, there's a lot of room still because we're only allocating a third of the stated need for new demand.
After the $1,000 buffer.
After a 1,000 acre
acre
foot
feet
buffer. Yeah.
Dollars acre feet, you know what?
Yeah, we know what you mean.
So,
Well, and I'll just, through the chair, to your comment, Director Edwards, it's tiring. This is tiring. We always want to get the input. We want to figure out where our numbers are right, where they're wrong, try to understand why our demand is where it is, why it's lower than the year before, which was lower than the year before, which was lower than the year before. It's tiring to see different political or perspective motivations that are behind this sort of outrage as to what our needs are and what they're not, and we're in an election cycle, so it's accelerated, and it's tiring. Thank you for answering Director Edwards' questions, because I was curious to see what your response was to some of this. I'm tired. Well, because it's not, I'll just say this and I'll let it go. There's a science behind it, there's a hydrological science behind it, but it's not rocket science. I mean, we're not sending people to the moon. This is a finite amount of data here, how we can get so many diverse, I would say, opinions on something that is a finite.
well, this goes to
Not so
the,
many.
this goes to the,
And everybody else.
well, it goes to the heart of the matter about let's quit living in a alternate views of the future world where your view, my view, his view, that view, we're all saying what it's going to be like. And let's get to a point where we can live in it and see what it looks like. The goal should be to get rid of the moratorium, turn the cities loose with their water and see what happens.
To end the scarcity, the situation
Yeah.
of
As
scarcity,
opposed
and see how the cities grow.
as opposed to holding one source of water hostage so that you can build I don't know how much it's going to cost other sources
Well,
of
and
water.
let's say you're moving forward with the desal plant because they're doing their best to permit it. So let's say it moves forward without our input. I still want to lift the moratorium so that we can start building and you can see, are we really pent up demand going to need that desal plant so quickly or not? But you can't see it until you can pull the guardrails off.
And then, look at the facts, look at the reality, how much is usage changing?
Yeah.
And hold on to 2/3.
Yeah.
Well, you let the
Plus-
first third go and see what happens.
Plus 1,000.
Plus 1,000.
So, as George reminded us, there's opportunities for course correction as needed, so.
Well, right. I mean, that's the part, and this is my last comment, I promise. It is an ambulatory process. Even once this is done, we come back. And I'm sure you'll hear from the jurisdictions if they want you to.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Is that-
I just want to say, this took a lot of time, but it's an important piece of the planning process. Absolutely, it affects everybody in the county, everybody in our district, and every jurisdiction in different ways, and some of it's kind of similar. But until we know more, this is the best estimate there is, coming from the only source of data that's not biased by the source or the self-source. So I mean, I'm comparing
Yeah.
desal data coming from Cal-Am and our data not necessarily coming from the district, it's coming from in. There's a big difference there.
Okay. We ready to go home? Adjourned.